Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to this morning's BCP Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Kelsey, and it's my job to chair this meeting this morning. And the first thing that I will do is pass over to Jill Hollyoak to read out the housekeeping notices. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Planning Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chairman in case of disruption. For those in the room, if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point under the Brady Road flyover. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Committee members for this meeting today are myself, Councillor Kelsey, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Barron, Councillor Borthwick, Councillor Bull, Councillor Hall, Councillor Hilliard, Councillor Lawton, Councillor Lepedevin, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Trent and Councillor Rice, who will be arriving shortly. We also have in the room the officers. We have Mr Hodges, who is the lead officer for this meeting and the team leader. We have Robert Firth, who is head of legal for this meeting, and we have Sam Fox, who is head of planning. We also have other officers in the room who will be presenting cases and other officers in the background working away for us. First item for the agenda is apologies. Do we have apologies, please, Jill?
Thank you. Apologies have been received from Councillor Malcolm Davies, Councillor George Farquhar and Councillor Simon McCormack. And item 2, substitute members, there are no substitutes today.
Members, does anyone have any declarations of interest for the items on today's agenda? Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. Item C, Glenmount Drive, I think it's item C. I've had too many discussions with objectors to vote without a bias on this, so I don't feel comfortable voting, but if I can say a few words about it as the ward councillor and then go to the public gallery for the vote, for the debate. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any further declarations? No. Confirmation of minutes. Do members agree to me signing minutes from the previous meetings? Yep, thank you. Please note that Part A of the protocol for public speaking is being used for this meeting. This allows people to attend and speak in person if they wish to, and I am exercising discretion as chairman to allow people to attend and speak virtually on Teams if preferred. So we'll now move on to item 6, which is a schedule of planning applications. There are 3 applications on the agenda today, but I firstly must move and ask members that they agree whether St Oldheims Academy can be deferred. We've had a request from the applicant for this deferral, and this is so that conditions can be carried on being discussed with Natural England. And I'd ask members if they're happy for that to be deferred. Agreed? Yeah, seconder, Councillor Johnson for that. Yeah, go on. Microphone, please, Councillor Trent.
We might actually be about to say the same thing. On the plans list, it's listed as Newtown and Heaven, but it's actually Oldley and Bourne Valley. Yeah. I did point it out, but
yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
That wasn't what I was going to say. I was just making the general comment. I've made this comment before. I'm fed up of having things on the agenda only published a week ago and then deferred at the last minute. I mean, please, can't people get their act together? We never used to have so many deferrals in pool. We had the occasional one, but not the regularity that we get here.
Well, this is
some people are not getting their act together. I mean, it's not always the same reason.
No.
It's not the same person or organisation requesting deferral, but I'm getting sick of it, frankly. Going out to visit places and then finding it's been pulled. It's a waste of everybody's time.
Well,
so please, will people get their act together on this?
They will try, I'm sure, and these things can't be helped all the time. And this is an application from the applicant for the deferral on this one. Not.
It's indeed.
Yeah, exactly. So they're in continuing talks with Natural England, who are the objector on this occasion. So we have to give them time to try and sort these conditions out. So with that one deferred, we'll move on to item 6A, which is 9 Ravine Road. And I would ask Peter if you would introduce the case, please, Peter.
Morning, Chair. Morning, everyone. Let me quickly share the screen. Hopefully you can see that. Can you see the full screen? Just double check that with you. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Peter, you need to share it a different way because we can still see your chat and everything else at the side of that.
Oh,
That's better.
Oh, I'll just
No.
check that.
Share your window, Peter.
Yeah, Max, I did. Okay, sorry for that. You see that now?
Right. Yep, that's better.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so the application site is 9 Ravine Roads, and the proposal is for demolition of existing dwelling house to erect 4 dwellings with associated access and parking. The proposal relates to the circa 1930s 2-story detached dwelling on a west side of Ravine Roads. The property benefits from a double plot with a mature garden wrapping around its side and rear boundary. There is a tree preservation order at the back of the sites, but it's actually behind the rear boundary of the site and is covering individual trees with a school set behind as well. The site also sits with a neighbourhood plan boundary. So the proposal is to demolish the existing 4-bedroom detached house and to erect 2 pairs of semi-detached 4-bedroom houses. The local area character consists of large detached dwellings set within large uniform plots with no dominant design style. Usually the car parking is more limited to the front of those dwellings. However, there are some examples of dominated frontages with car parking and hard starting within proximity to the application site. The footprint of the proposal will be fairly similar to the footprint of surrounding dwellings, providing 2 detached buildings that will reflect the existing front building line and will be of comparable size. There is proposed tandem car parking of 2 car parking spaces serving each dwelling. And also there will be soft landscaping to the front of the proposed houses to reflect the local verdant field of the rear. Each property will benefit from approximately 60 square meters rear garden. It should be noted that a large block of 3 flats to the side of existing dwelling house was permitted in 2012, although not implemented. The permitted drawing show a bulky building of a larger footprint than this of the proposed pair of semi-detached houses. Also, the permitted design shows a mixture of contemporary elements that not fully reflect the vernacular feature of the locality. As such, the principle of redevelopment of the site and increased number of residential units has already been agreed and, as I said, has not been implemented. Therefore, this permission from 2012 is considered as a material planning consideration. Policy BAP 1 of the neighbourhood plan suggests retention of all buildings of architectural or local heritage value. However, it is not considered that the existing dwelling house is of any noted architectural merit and has already been altered over the years. The proposed scheme will provide substantial community benefit in form of new housing stock and brownfield site redevelopments in a sustainable location. Also, through several amendments of the scheme, the final drawing show semi-detached units in form of detached house with a single access door to each elevation, and also the street scene shows that proposed units will reflect the style and massing of the adjacent neighbouring properties, therefore would not dominate the local setting. The density of development along Ravine Road is estimated at approximately 18 dwellings per hectare, and the proposed plot subdivision will provide a density of 36 dwellings per hectare. Policy BAP 1 seeks to resist development in excess of 100 dwellings per hectare. Therefore, the proposed work will comply with this particular policy. Also, the development proposes a different housing mix to the one set by policy BAP 6A2, but does not conflict with the aim of policy itself, which will provide large 4-bedroom family units with floor plans in excess of minimum space standards. The aim of policy BAP 6B and BAP 1 also will be satisfied, as the scheme will provide accessible density. Also, it should be noted that the aim 2 of the neighbourhood plan states that there is a presumption in favour of family dwellings of at least 2 bedrooms, and 85% people voted in favour of that. The last, this slide will show the existing garden, its side and rear, and potential for development of the site next to adjacent neighbours. And in summary, this development will provide acceptable scheme in terms of design, scale, massing, and density. There will be no adverse impact upon neighbouring amenities, and this development will comply with a highway recommendation. The proposed work will satisfy policy requirements, and therefore the recommendation is planning approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill.
The first speaker in objection is Dr. Robert Wilson. Dr. Wilson, if you'd like to come forward and make your statement.
Yes, please. No, just press it.
Right. Ravine Road is a fine example of the very best of 1920s and makes a positive contribution to Bournemouth and its houses. Number 9 is an integral part of this. The Secretary of State's planning inspector, Mr. Bale, visited this area only a couple of years ago. And this was his comment. Although the cliff top has been developed into flats, the roads running down are single family plots, which proposal to change would result in clear harm to the area in character and appearance. These buildings make a positive contribution to the area and should be thought of as non-designated heritage assets. That's the inspector from Bristol. I estimate, and others have estimated, that 577 people or their comments have objected to this development. 577, with 2 petitions, one of 72 and one of 96 objections. And I may be right or wrong, but I haven't noticed a single comment in support of this development. 4 large houses, 3 floors, filling the site of 1 house and its garden. The Boscombe and Poachdown plan, 2019, 98% support when it was passed, noted this area to be a particular area of conservation with planning restrictions. Policy 21 of those planning restrictions state that Ravine Road is protected from intensification. New housing, this is quoted directly, only being allowed in accordance with the scale, character, appearance and density of existing houses. This proposal breaks every one of these criteria and sets a dangerous precedent. BAP Policy 1, quote, directly, demolition will not be supported except in exceptional circumstances. Families wish to buy this house. 2 doctors inform me they wish to buy and bring up their family in this house and that they've been the higher bidder. BAP Policy 1, spaces between buildings should not be infilled. This is an entire infilling job. BAP Policy 2, demolition is a violation of BAP Policy 1 and 2 and involves the wastage of building materials. Renovation and conservation stops wastage and keeps the character of the area and stops energy wastage and climate change. And BAP Policy 6 and 7 requires sympathetic conversion of existing buildings. On every point, this development is completely inappropriate, out of keeping, and bears no acknowledgement of the heritage of the street and has caused great anxiety and distress to a very large number of people. There has also been noted on the site bats, which have been officially noted, and I believe the planning department have been informed of that. It's a habitat. And there's also the question of current street parking places.
I'm sorry, Doctor, but your speaking time is up.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And second objection is from Dr. Elkin Cohn of Ravine Road. 1. The current house is in keeping with the area and habitable. Renovation would be preferable to demolition. Policy BAP 1 states, proposals involving the demolition of existing buildings will not be supported unless there are exceptional circumstances. These do not exist. Policy BAP 2 states, demolition of an existing building is a violation of both BAP 1 and 2 in wastage of building materials. Policy BAP 6 and 7 states, the number and type of new homes and additional dwellings will be provided through sympathetic conversion and extension of existing buildings. 2. The building of four-bedroom houses on this site is intensification, to say the least, and is contrary to the neighbourhood planning CS21. The proposed plot will be overcrowded and overdeveloped. From one existing house in keeping with the architecture of the road, it is planned to have 4 modern homes out of keeping with the immediate neighbourhood. Outrageous. 3. The proposed design is out of character for the area, has no allowance, as I can see it, for car parking, which will require even more of the road to be taken up by the cars of the new property owners. 4. This is already a very busy road, carrying school traffic, including coaches at peak times, and is made worse by the increase in cars parked for access to the beach in the summer months due to the Portman Ravine zigzag. It is also used by people related to the school for their parking. 4 new homes instead of 1 house will clearly bring in excessive traffic. 5. The proposed houses are to be built very close to the front boundary and not set back, as with all the other houses, which will create a feeling of being crowded. Policy BAP 1 states, spaces between buildings should not be infilled. For these reasons, my wife and I strongly oppose this application. And first statement from Councillor Andy Jones, Ward Councillor, is unable to attend. Yet again, totally unsuitable plans have been submitted in this area of Boscombe East to demolish a lovely, habitable and traditional 1930s property and replace it with 4 houses that are completely out of character with neighbouring properties and do absolutely nothing to preserve or enhance the existing street scene. This development represents the single largest building proposal in Ravine Road in almost 100 years. Speaks volumes, doesn't it? Policy BAP 1 of the Boscombe and Folkestone Neighbourhood Plan, the People's Plan, makes it clear that proposals involving the demolition of existing buildings will not be supported unless there are exceptional circumstances. Well, as far as I am concerned, none exist. BAP 1 continues, stating that spaces between buildings should not be infilled. Again, this application conveniently ignores that. Policy BAP 6 and 7 makes it clear that the number and type of new homes and additional dwellings will be provided through sympathetic conversion and extension of existing buildings. The present house is already in keeping with the architecture of the road. A sympathetic conversion or extension is easily achievable here. In my opinion, the current property is fully marketable as a house and garden and would attract offers from families who wish to buy it with only minor works being carried out, which would preserve the building's existing features and therefore respect the street scene. Furthermore, it should be pointed out that demolition and replacement of a perfectly viable family home would result in generating an unacceptable high level of carbon dioxide, which is contrary to BCP's carbon policy. In conclusion, this application does not support key policies contained within the Boscombe and Folkestone Neighbourhood Plan. I urge the Planning Committee to reject this application without hesitation. Chairman, I have to apologise that I have listed the person speaking to you.
Mr. Annan, I think you're here. I'm sorry. No, that's fine. We just went slightly out of sync there. Thank you.
Hello members. My name is Matt Annan. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and Director of Pure Town Planning. The planning officer has comprehensively explained the full details of the proposed scheme in his opening presentation to you. Throughout this application process, we've worked closely with your officers, for which we thank them for their time and efforts in this regard. I wish to briefly outline the main considerations why we feel planning permission should be granted today in line with the officer's recommendation. Firstly, looking at the principle and the character. As you're aware, Bournemouth and BCP have a significant shortage in housing, and as such, the benefits from the supply of new homes must have significant weight and a tilted balance in granting in favour of planning permission. Policy CS19 seeks to retain small family dwellings, but due to its size, 315 square metres, the existing dwelling would not comprise a small family dwelling, and thus its loss cannot be objected to on this policy. Furthermore, the existing 1930s detached dwelling, which, as you heard, has been substantially altered, is not listed, nor is it considered by the LPA to be a non-designated heritage asset. Therefore, its loss should not be resisted in principle. The new dwellings raise in size from 168 square metres to 202, and thus are more closely related to what the local plan considered to be a small family dwelling. So this scheme would deliver 4 family dwelling houses in a highly sustainable location. Following the comments of the previous neighbour, it should be noted that consent was previously granted on site for a block of flats in the gap. Policy BA6, BAP6 of the Boscombe and Folkestone Neighbour Plan prescribes housing splits. And advises at least 50% should be 3-bedroom houses or larger. The purpose of this policy is to address the historic problem of an excessive provision of 1-bedroom units in the area. We're providing 4 4-bedroom family homes. So in terms of the proposal, we are meeting the aspirations and intentions of BAP6 by delivering better sized, higher quality dwellings in this area. The dwellings have been purposely designed as pair of semi-detached dwellings, that you heard, in order to respect the rhythm and the spacing of built form in the street scene. They have been traditionally designed with bay window and gable features, decorative chimney and ridge tiles and roof forms, incorporating sensibly sized dormers with sprocketed eaves. The dwellings have also been finished using high quality materials with stone detailing around the windows. As a result, your officers consider the scheme is of good design, maintains and enhances the quality of the street scene, and respects the site and its surrounding in full accordance with national policy. Secondly, amenity. Given the proposed siting of the dwellings, the floor plans, layout and window arrangements ensure there are no side windows facing neighbours above ground floor, and thus would not lead to any harmful overlooking or over dominance of the adjoining neighbours at number 7 and 13 Ravine Road. Incidentally, there is no number 11 in the road. That's where the gap is. Given the separation gap of the school behind, together with the mature intervening tree screening, this relationship is also considered acceptable. As such, the privacy and amenity of all neighbours will be safeguarded. All 4 dwellings have been designed to exceed nationally prescribed minimum space standards, and all habitable rooms have been arranged to receive ample levels of natural daylight with good outlooks. Each dwelling has its own private, secure and good-sized garden. Therefore, the scheme provides a high level of residential amenity for future residents. Thirdly, highways. Following initial reservations raised by the highways officer, revised plans were submitted to address the concerns, and following consultation, your highways officer is now in full support of the scheme, which provides 2 off-street parking spaces with compliant visibility sprays, a dedicated bike store providing space for 4 cycles for each dwelling, and each house has its own electrical vehicle charging points. Lastly, ecology. The applicant commissioned a preliminary bat roof appraisal which revealed no evidence of bats. In line with good practice, 3 further surveys were carried out, and following the sighting of 1 bat, a full bat mitigation and survey report was submitted. The council ecologists have confirmed they have no objection to the proposal and are very satisfied with the net gains proposed for biodiversity mitigation with this scheme, which include the provision of multiple built-in bat boxes, providing additional bat roosting, 4 swift and sparrow brick boxes per dwelling, 2 bee bricks per dwelling, planting of 4 new fruit trees. All hedge and tree planting consists of British native species only, and all boundaries to include hedgehog highways. Councillors, this scheme would help the council meet its housing target by delivering 4 family houses in a sustainable location close to local shops, services and schools, whilst not detrimentally impacting on the character and appearance of the area, neighbouring amenity, highway safety or ecology. I hope you agree with your officer's recommendation to grant permission and vote in favour of approving this proposal accordingly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Again, apologies for not bringing you in at the correct time. Councillor Farquhar, you're with us this morning as a ward councillor. Would you like to speak now, please?
Absolutely, Chair, and thank you very much for your discretion for allowing me to speak and accepting my apologies not to be there in person today. Firstly, I'd just like to start by thanking the quite excellent presentations that you've already heard for the representations. They echo a lot of what I've got to say, so I will bring some new points to the table for the benefit of the committee for their consideration, if you please. So the first one, which I'd like to sort of say, is that this has been brought by my fellow ward councillor based upon the very strong feeling of the not only the community forums but also the Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan, but also the objections from residents. I am not pre-decided on this, but I am decided that it's I wish to speak and represent those those voices within our community. As has already been pointed out, this proposal is specifically against the Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan. It's against the demolition, and it is against the presumption for infill. I think a very good case has been made, but I think there is a precedent being set here that the committees need to be very aware of for the importance of a neighbourhood plan. Some of your wards may well actually adopt a neighbourhood plan themselves. The officer's presentation pointed to the fact that in 2012 that there was prior approval. 2012, 7 years before the adoption of the Boscombe and Folkestone neighbourhood plan. Therefore, I believe that that should be disregarded as a consideration here, because the neighbourhood plan should take precedence, because the consultation was very comprehensive, and the voting on the referendum, the legal process for it to be a material consideration, a neighbourhood plan to be a material consideration, takes precedence of a prior approval prior to the neighbourhood plan. The officer notes in section 18, if I could bring the committee's attention to it, that there's 249 objections. One of my concerns here is that I don't believe that there is anywhere in the regulations or the legislation that, as the officer's note says at the bottom, numerous letters received appear to be an exact copy and paste wording under different names. Representations from the community is very difficult for some people to actually articulate. There would not be a councillor on this committee today that hasn't had to help a resident to actually put together a representation whereby they can understand what is considered to be planning considerations. That doesn't mean that their voice shouldn't be heard if somebody else helps them to actually word what their objections is going to be that are material to the application itself. So my great thanks to the Folkestone Community Forum, who are great advocates for the neighbourhood plan, and also great advocates for all the residents within the community that actually wish to make a representation for planning which actually affects them directly. The president to the committee members here is that this application plans to set a precedence to sideline a step or to dance on the head of a pin for the neighbourhood plan, for the BAP. I'll bring you back to the fact that it is quite specific that the president must not be allowed that a demolition can take place so that you can build more homes. And you must not allow yourself to be swayed that the neighbourhood plan doesn't have the reflection of the residents that actually voted in the referendum for that to protect the character of the communities in which they live. The last thing which I'd like to say, Chair, is that there's also a precedent set here that if this is approved, that the character, I live in the ward, I walk the streets, I speak to the residents, the character of the streets that run from the Overcliff up to Beechwood and Wentworth Avenue, each one of those roads is specific in its own character. So this is a character street, and the next one is a character street, and the next one is a character street. But if we set a precedence that somebody can knock down a 4-bedroom dwelling house and then replace it with a semi or a flats, then that precedence will be set in direct contradiction to the neighbourhood plan and to what the residents actually voted for in October of 2019. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Peter, is there anything that you've heard in the presentation so far that you'd like to come back on? And it'd be really interesting if you could just clarify the fact that demolition could be allowed if they were to come for a prior approval notice. There is nothing to say that they cannot demolish that building. I think it'd be really helpful if you clarify those points. Thank you.
Yes, that's correct. That's a pretty crucial point. You know, there is a process called prior approval, which normally takes up to 28 days, and in fact could allow demolition of existing house. So there's no like policy restriction in as such that could actually prevent of demolition of this house. This dwelling, probably the starting point is this dwelling could be demolished under a prior approval process.
And are there any other points that you'd like to come back on what you've heard so far?
Not yet, no.
Okay, so we'll go to members. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. Yeah, one of my questions was related to bats, but I won't ask that because I think the applicant appears to have gone above and beyond the protection of the bat species. But one of the objectors did raise the question of the building line being out of sync with surrounding properties. Could you comment on that? And if they are out of sync or out of line with surrounding properties, what the difference is? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, as I mentioned during my presentation, and also officers' report mentioned that those proposed units will be of comparable size in terms of footprint and in line with other properties. So if you refer to the building line along the road, it's actually they are in line with other properties, which is obviously presented on a site location plan, which I also presented today. So I'm not sure. Do you want to see my presentation again, or should I refer to some plans?
If you can bring the pictures up of the street scene and the predicted what it's going to look like, Peter, that would be helpful. Thank you.
You see that? Yeah. So yes, as I mentioned during my presentation, those dwellings will be of comparable size, will not dominate the adjacent buildings, and just going back to the site plan will be in line with other adjacent properties. So we'll actually respect the existing building line.
Happy there, Councillor O'Neill?
Yes, thank you. It's reassuring. Yeah, I guess having read the report to some length and gone over it 2 or 3 times, I note that a number of officers are actually in favour of the development, and it does seem that it's a considerably large plot actually, and whether ultimately the intensification and the design of the properties has a negative effect. I'll say no more than that at this juncture. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor O'Neill. Any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Pettit.
Thank you. For me, there are really 2 issues here. One is building on the vacant plot of number 11. Clearly, when the road was set out, laid out and numbered, there was every intention to be a building, a property, a house, probably, on that site. So I don't see putting something there as necessary. I wouldn't see it as infilling. It is bringing the road up to what was always the intention. Depends what's being built there, of course. I mean, a 6-storey block of flats, no, absolutely no way. But the design of what is proposed here, although they are semi-detached, to me, when built in the street scene, will look perfectly of a piece with what's there now. There is no consistency of design. I don't think any 2 of the existing properties and the same. Going down the road towards the sea, there is one house that is clearly much more modern, much more recently built than others, and of a less traditional design, I would say, than what's proposed here. So I have no problem at all with what is proposed for the vacant plot at number 11. My issue would be with demolishing a perfectly good house at number 9, because on principle, I don't like demolition of usable properties for any reason. If it was a vacant plot, what's designed, what's proposed would be perfectly acceptable to me. But demolishing number 9, I do not find acceptable. So that puts me in a dilemma about how I vote when it comes to it.
Thank you, Councillor Pittman. Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just be happier if I heard a bit more clarification on the bats issue, because we've got an objector saying there are bats there and then the applicant saying there isn't. So I just want some kind of clarification on that. And also, the applicant mentioned that there was planning, I think if I got this right, there was planning already on the property on that for flats. I tried to load the application up and my page wouldn't load, so we could just get an image up. I know it's a bit of a pain, but if we could get an image up of what's being approved there, that would be quite helpful for me.
I don't think
no, can't do that.
We probably don't have it because it was quite an old application. But there is an extant permission on that site, and with regards to the bats, Peter did say that there was a bat found there, but the mitigations that have been put in place will counteract that now. They have put extra bat boxes in to allow that to happen. So that's it's on the screen now. Peter, is there anything you'd like to come back on with that?
I mean, in terms of bats, yes, bat survey was provided. That was one of the main. Application was delayed, and we couldn't issue a decision on time. The application was reconsulted with our ecologists and was agreed that mitigation presented is acceptable, subject to conditions and to comply with those mitigations.
And again, I see that on the 2012 approval, again, that was actually for 2 buildings to go on that site. Is that correct?
No, that's incorrect. It's actually was retention for existing dwelling house, which we can see on the right-hand side, and that was a proposal. So actually was redevelopment of the site of the existing dwelling house to provide this block of flats.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So members, Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that 2012 approval, could we just have legal advice? Obviously, as we said, the neighbourhood plan has come after that. Was the development actually started, or is it merely that there was prior approval which lapsed, and now it's a mature consideration or not? Thank you.
Mr. First.
I confess I don't know enough about the history of the 2012 Commission to express a clearer view on that. My colleague, Mr. Hodges, may be able to. As a general point, if it hasn't been implemented, then the Commission would have lapsed. It has a relevance to material consideration from a consistency point of view. But having said that, it's correct to also identify there's been subsequent plans that have been adopted, and obviously they would also be relevant in determining the relevance of the original permission.
And a second question, please. So again, looking at the neighbourhood plan, the back one talking about demolition, it's referring to buildings of architectural and local heritage. And whilst you could argue the neighbours and the road, the street scene is a local heritage value, then when it's talking about demolition, it needs to be a particular reason. So it seems to be that the BAP seems to have 2 separate elements, and I can't join them up. The local heritage part, which I think exists, which goes against the demolish. Can you just expand on that? Thanks.
I'm not sure I quite fully understand the question, but I'll do my best to try and answer it anyway. I think first of all, the point to make on the significance or otherwise of this particular building as a heritage asset, you've got an officer view expressed in the report, as I understand it, which is a paragraph. Bear with me. Found it and I've lost it again there. Apologise.
That's fine.
Paragraph 35. So the officer view is that they've looked at the situation. They don't think the building warrants status as a designated heritage asset. That's the view of officers. Obviously, members could take a different view, but that's the view of the officers. If members felt it warranted a view as a non-designated heritage asset, then that would open up a separate area of consideration, which would be brought within the scope of the MPPF and the need to consider it in that context and whether the benefits of the scheme outweigh the harm. But at this moment, the officer's position is that they don't think it is of sufficient value to warrant that status.
Okay, thanks for that information. Yeah, from my point of view, obviously, people take the time to do neighbourhood plans because they love their area, they've got a passion for their area, and street scene is a major impact to them. And so it's interpretation of local heritage, and I think in this case, and I would say it probably happens in my ward, people think their road is of character, and they want to protect that, and I think that's the whole point of neighbourhood plan. So it's in there. So yeah, I would be against this. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I find myself in a very similar position to Councillor Lepedevin when she spoke earlier, regarding that, you know, you don't want to see a house like that go. It seems pointless. However, my mind is, well, it's not put at ease necessarily, but the argument there is the fact that, again, we have very little power to stop that demolition, regardless of the neighbourhood plan. The overall national planning policy supersedes that, and so a 28-day prior approval could be put in, and that house could go, regardless of whether there's any planning permission to replace it. So, for me, just running through a few of the issues that have been raised in terms of the street scene, I think that the proposed developments would blend in very well. They're of very comparable size to the surrounding buildings. Yes, they will be semi-detached and not detached, but from the street scene to a passerby, that won't be immediately visible. And in terms of the plot sizes to the rear, the only people that will affect will be the future residents of the proposed development. I think that the design is very sympathetic to the local area. It's not trying to impose a brand new contemporary style on an area where I don't believe that would fit. I think it's been very well thought out. In terms of the gap between the building, the neighbourhood plan doesn't want it to be infilled, but here I'm not sure you could call it infilling to put a building in a gap where there should be a building, where clearly by the numbering situation there was meant to be a building, and the proposed gaps are very, very similar and mimic exactly the gaps on the opposite side of the street. So it wouldn't look out of place in the street scene by my reckoning. Again, the demolition is very unfortunate, but apart from control the method of demolition, there's precious little that we can do, and I think it's important that we ensure that there is something that can go in there of high quality in its place. We need the kind of development that is proposed. We need those sizes of house, and regarding the heritage point of view, it is a very nice house, but it, to me anyway, is of no more architectural merit than any other house on that street, and therefore if we were to start going down and looking at labelling it as a non-designated heritage asset, I would argue that you'd have to do it for every single house on that street, and that's just not possible or logistical or makes much sense. So I can't see a planning reason to refuse this. I can see why the residents have interpreted the neighbourhood plan as they have, but I would just take a different interpretation. I think that this is within the spirit of the neighbourhood plan, and I would be supportive of the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Lepedevin.
I just want to ask a question about the prior approval for demolition. Is it automatically granted? Could it be refused?
Chairman, if someone submits a prior approval and it's not a building that is otherwise protected, i.e. it's in the conservation area it's listed, then the only control the local authority has is over the method of demolition, cannot prevent its demolition.
So just for clarification, the local authority can't say, this is a nice building, it may not be listed or heritage or anything like that, it's a nice building, we think it's got a life, a future, you can't demolish it. You can't. Thank you. Perfect.
Councillor Ball?
Thank you, Chair. Just back on that point, it wasn't an issue I was going to talk, but surely if the neighbourhood plan restricts demolition, that would come into play in that circumstance.
Mr. Hodges?
Thank you, Chairman. No, that's a primary piece of legislation. So the General Community Development Order is a primary piece of legislation that takes precedent over anything that's in a local plan. So the local plan can express a desire to retain buildings, but ultimately if there's a fallback position that they can use those rights under the primary legislation, then that would take precedent. It is an issue, and it's an issue that affects things like local use buildings as well.
Thank you, that's helpful. Further to that, though, I'm still very reluctant to go against the neighbourhood plan that was very well supported in the area. It does appear that we're disregarding it to some extent. After, if people vote for these things and they go through, they expect us to honour them, and I feel that we wouldn't be honouring them if we were to allow this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Balsworth?
I do know this road particularly. It is a very, very busy road to get down to the beach because it's well used. And I find it difficult to look at the street scene because you've got these big houses on either side. So I just don't understand, why people don't realise how congested this little area is because it's such a popular thing to go down to the beach, So yeah, that's my experience of this road. Difficulty in seeing the streets.
Thank you, Councillor Balsworth. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. There was mention that there was a couple of petitions, but they're not listed as objectors. Were they just not given in? Is there any confirmation of that, please?
Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Officer's report refers to petition, but we treat that as a single objection as such. So we don't really count signatures as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, when a petition is submitted, it is just clarified as an objection. Right. Even though there may be 70, 80, 90 people on that, it's still classified as one objection.
Okay, thanks for that. I move to refuse this approval on SPAT 1 on the demolition, that it is a local character property.
Thank you, Councillor Hilliard. Do you have a seconder for that move? Thank you, Councillor Bull. Just for the record now, as everyone else has spoken, I will not support that move. And one of the reasons why I won't support that move is because the neighbourhood plan, whilst it's great to have it in place, there is a prior approval on that site for flats, which is one of the things that the neighbourhood plan definitely did not want. They don't want any more flats. So to me, having the two semi-detached 4-bedroom houses, which is in the housing need, what the neighbourhood plan asks for, they ask for more family housing. That is what is being provided. And I think the 4 family housing would be much more of a betterment than having a block of flats on that site, because that surely would create a precedent for that road to then start having blocks of flats built on it. Whereas to have 2 semi-detached buildings put on it, I think will be a much better situation for that road. They're both very well designed houses. You have one front door looking at each of the buildings. They automatically look like they are detached houses. The second door is around the side. The design of them has been done very, very sympathetically with what's already in the road. And to keep that road looking like it is just single houses is a real bonus to the applicant. I'm actually quite astounded that they had the foresight to do that on these ones. I think they've done a very good job on it. But as I say, I will not support the move to refuse this one, but as is the right, we will go to the vote on this. So we have a move to refuse.
Chairman,
Yes, Ms.
If
Hodges.
possible, if we could just clarify those reasons for issues.
Yeah, please do.
Grateful.
Councillor Hilliard?
Thank you. Yeah, so back one is talking about retention of buildings of architectural or local heritage value. And although it's not listed, it's been recognised that these streets around the cliff top have character, local character. So that's the first part. And then it's saying proposals involving demolition of existing will not be supported unless the building is poor design, which is not, out of keeping is not. 2, there is evidence of building not structure. I haven't heard anything to suggest that the building's falling down. Or 3, that there'll be clear evidence that development will bring substantial community benefits such as major employment. That 2, 3 additional houses, you could argue some benefit, but I don't think it ticks any of those boxes. So that's why back one.
Happy with that, Mr. Hodges?
Chairman, the only thing I'd like to just point out, it's just a caution in respect of that. If I look at BAP1, the first paragraph talks about retention of all buildings of architectural and local heritage value be supported in order to preserve the historic character and amenity of the area, safe building materials and not exacerbate pressure on existing services. Then there's an asterisk, and then it goes on to the paragraph about proposals involving demolition of existing buildings will not be supported. So as I read that policy, we only apply that criteria about demolishing a building where we've established the buildings of architectural local heritage value. Now, the rest of the document doesn't establish the particular building or the street as being something they want to retain. So there's a table elsewhere in the neighbourhood plan that identifies locally listed buildings as heritage assets to be retained, but doesn't particularly identify the streets as being falling within the ambit of that first paragraph. So that's my only recommendation. The only other thing I'd just add is if the move goes ahead, is we do need to have the reason produced on the heat investigation as well. So we haven't secured that. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges. Okay, members, all happy? In that case, I'll call names and either for the move to refuse or against, please. Councillor Barron.
For.
Councillor Bull.
For.
Councillor Hall. Councillor Hilliard.
For.
Councillor Lawton. Councillor Pedevin.
Against.
Councillor O'Neill.
Against.
Councillor Trent.
For.
Councillor Rice, I didn't ask you because obviously you came in halfway through, so you're happy with that, yes? Thank you very much. Myself, I'm against that move. Councillor Johnson?
Against.
Thank you very much. Could we have that on this, please, John?
So that's 6 votes in favour of the move to refuse and 5 against.
So that application has been refused by 6 votes to 5. Thank you for the applicant and thank you very much for the residents for coming along and taking part in that one. Thank you. So we'll now move on to the next application. A couple of minutes while we're swapping over with people and that, members. If anyone wants to take a very, very short comfort break, please. Welcome back to this morning's BCP Planning Committee meeting. We'll move on now with item 6C, which is 8 Glenmount Drive in Poole. And I'd like to welcome along Jed Goodwin to his first meeting with us this morning and ask him to present his case, please, Jed.
Good morning, members. So today I'll be presenting 8 Glenmount Drive. This is an outline planning application for the layout and scale for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of one pair of semi-detached dwellings and one detached dwelling house. So this is the site location plan. So here is the application site, and to the west of the site we have number 10 Glenmount Drive, which is will be explained a bit further, but we've got a lot of development that's taking place here. So at number 10 we've got a recent approval for actually under construction for a platted block of flats, and down here at number 2, just slightly further out of the shot of this, here we go, number 2, we've had a recent approval for subdivision of the site into 4 smaller plots. So these are some of the site photographs. So as you can see, it's a traditional 1970s style dwelling, positioned on an elevated position, with undercroft parking underneath, and it's surrounded by mature trees. Here's some more photos of the surrounding area. So the second photo here, this is the recent approval, which is currently under construction for a block of flats, which the photos of that we plans of that are in the subsequent slides. And this is also, this is another kind of form of development within the street. And as you can see, it's a very varied architectural character of this area. There's not any one kind of architectural design fitting in this area. So here we have is a proposed site plan. So as you can see, the red outline here shows the existing dwelling, and what the proposed site plan shows is a subdivision of the plot into 3, of which plot 1 would be a detached dwelling, and units 2 and 3 would be a semi-detached pair of dwellings. The existing access will be widened and utilised by units 2 and 3. A new vehicle access is proposed to serve units 1, and parking is provided to the front of each dwelling, and each of the dwellings also benefit from integral garages. And there's been no objections from the Highways Authority with regards to this. So there was previous application on the site, but this reduced scheme results in a betterment and also reduces the number of highways comments that were previously made on this one. So here we have the floor plans of the proposed dwellings. So they are 4-bedroom dwellings. As previously mentioned, each of the dwellings would have integrated garages. And they're 4-bedroom family-sized dwellings. Here are some indicative elevations. So this would be subject to reserve matters for the appearance, but this is just kind of an indication of what could potentially be constructed on this site. But yeah, as I said, that would be subject to the reserve matters. So here is a perception of how the site would appear in the street scene through the section through of the plan. So it would dig into the slope of the site to make maximum use of kind of the geology, the site. And what you would then have is the appearance of a 3-story building from the front, but obviously at other points of the site and surrounding it has more of a compacted scale because of the utilisation of the site of that. So this is the aforementioned scheme approved at number 2 Glenmount Drive. So again, this was a similar larger detached property, and this site has been subdivided into 4 plots of similar proportions to what is being proposed for number 8 Glenmount Drive. So therefore, it is considered that in regards to PP 28 with plot severance, we get an equal plot sizes, albeit smaller than what originally was planned on this part of the road. We are getting appropriate forms of development within that. and this is the approved scheme to the west at number 10 Glenmount Drive. So our application site at number 8 is just here to the east of this, where my cursor is. And as you can see, we've got a flatted block of a contemporary modern appearance with flat roofs, which would be similar to the design approach illustrated on the indicative elevations shown a few slides ago. And finally, slide 12. So this is a proposed indicative landscaping. So to the front is a large tree which is proposed to be removed. However, the plan illustrates mitigation measures in how it could be achieved. The landscaping could be improved to result in a better kind of soft landscaping for the street scene and also the surrounding area. And this would also help to mitigate against the loss of the tree at the front of the site. And that is their presentation finished.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Jill.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I call up Ruth Forrester and Marlene Trent, who are going to speak in objection to the application? They are going to share the 5-minute time slot between them.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Dear members, thank you for your time and for listening. I'm Ruth Forrester. I've owned 6 Glenmount Drive since 1997. During this time, I've been active in trying to preserve our trees, as can be seen from my objections against felling on the planning website. This is my neighbour Marlene Trent from number 4. There is a beautiful mature TPO'd beech tree in 8 Glenmount Drive's front garden. The last presentation said that there was better soft landscaping for the street scene. We don't think you can get better landscaping than this beautiful tree. This beautiful mature tree, it's more than 25 years old, not 10 years old, as the planning application falsely states. The tree has been here since before I bought my house. I can clearly see Harbourside Park when I stand at my window, which is halfway up along the side of the tree. The top of the tree is higher than the Pool Ridge. As such, the tree can be widely seen in Poole and is an amenity for the people of Poole, as well as being a visual asset in our close. I'm horrified that the developer wants to fell it. The real reason for felling is so that he can get planning permission through. He cannot make his costings work unless the TPO'd tree is removed. The dangerous wall referred to in the developer's structural report can readily be replaced and rebuilt without felling the tree. This can be done by using shuttering along and inside the existing wall to retain the soil, and then rebuilding the wall to the required standard outside the shuttering. There is no need to fell the tree. The wall has been in its damaged state for about 15 years. For years, streams of water flowed across the road after escaping through that wall. Damage to the wall was caused by these springs of water. Tree roots are not a problem. Ward Councillor Stribley and Councillor Barron, who I believe is a former tree surgeon, each independently thought that the tree's roots were not a problem. Tree surgeons working at 4 and 1 Glenmount Drive have also advised that the beech tree is not damaging the wall. Are our council really agreeing to felling another mature tree given our imminent climate catastrophe? We need to keep trees, not fell them. Trees will be the lifeline out of the dire global warming. So many people seem to have their head in the sand. Denial, climate catastrophe not going to happen to us. I ask that the committee kindly give us time to obtain an independent, i.e. not hired by the developer or council, independent tree specialist report, and to obtain an independent structural engineers report regarding the beech tree and confirming the ability to replace the wall without any need for felling the beech tree. Please would members kindly consider making their decision when we have these reports. I suggest we need to do everything possible to keep our trees for the sake of saving our planet. Obtaining these reports would not unreasonably delay the planning decision. Sadly, my mum died recently after a long illness, so I deferred at the last meeting. Her funeral's on Monday, and between July and now, I have been repeatedly stayed at Mum's, which is a long journey from here. There's no internet there and poor mobile phone reception. It's all been very disruptive and has been difficult to communicate regarding the planning application. I apologise for that. The two beech trees, there are inaccuracies in the report, and there are two beech trees, T45 and 46, which aren't in the plan either. They were planted, replanted in about 2009, and they've mysteriously disappeared. Our trees are just disappearing. They're going, and I don't think we can afford to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You may. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
And speaking in support is Darryl Howells. Mr. Howells, if you'd like to come forward.
Good morning, members. Just for balance, following up, one mother passed away and she was buried yesterday, so it's a bit balancing act. I represent Darryl Howells Planning Consultancy, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant. I would ask you to fully endorse your planning officer's recommendation to approve following the detailed assessment of the application. As you have heard, the character of Glenmount Drive comprises large houses often seen in an elevated position above the roadside. Our scheme accords with those characteristics. The scale of the housing accords with new housing in the close, particularly at number 2 Glenmount Drive, which the planning officer has highlighted before. Each house will benefit from adequate car parking spaces and rearward amenity areas of sufficient size to meet the needs of the intended occupiers, but also to provide additional planting if necessary. The proposed scheme will cause no harm to neighbouring amenities due to the distance of separation and the careful positioning of the windows. As you have heard, the planning officer has spoken with the arboricultural officer, and the arboricultural officer fully supports the application. The scheme will result in the loss of a large beech tree positioned to the frontage. However, evidence has been produced by qualified engineers confirming this tree is causing damage to the property, which in turn could endanger life to pedestrians if a tall retaining wall collapses. In response to the representation by the neighbour, yes, I presume the wall could be replaced, but the roots of the trees would still be there and most likely cause further damage or potential loss of life. Your arboricultural officer confirms that the long-term retention of the tree is not possible. Paragraph 55 indicates that a tree work application would most likely be approved by the council based on the evidence we presented. This application will mitigate that loss of the This application will mitigate the loss of that tree by condition and will be controlled in terms of the size, species, and location of its positioning. I strongly urge members to support this application as we have listened to your planning officer and addressed the reasons for refusal. We reduced the scheme from 4 to 3 houses and thereby increased the plot sizes and the space around them to accord with the prevailing pattern of development. The scheme now fully complies with adopted planning policies, and in my professional opinion and that of your officers, the scheme should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Howes. Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm here today as the ward councillor speaking against this application. I'd also urge members to get the officer to get up a street view of the tree, because the photos that I saw in the presentation didn't properly show the tree. And for those of you who haven't done a site visit, I think that could be beneficial to the tree's future. I feel this scenario is unfolded as a result of planning permission originally being granted for the house there, and also the road by the previous borough of Poole, with no consideration whatsoever that the tree would grow. There are alternatives to felling the tree. The wall could be taken down. I actually worked many years ago on a similar scenario where in Travesty Glen, and the last time I was there, it's still there to this day, where there's a steel sheet put in and then railings put in to retain the soil back. I feel to approve this sends out a very dangerous message to developers that a protected tree is potentially damaging a boundary wall. It is acceptable to fell it. TPOs are there for this very reason, to protect the amenity and the environment. Approval could hardly be described as part of our cleaner, greener and safer aspirations as an authority. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. Jed, is there anything that you've heard that you would like to come back on so far?
No additional comments on.
No. I wonder if I could call the tree officer in, so before we go into a whole round of questions on trees, he can just update and talk to everyone about that particular tree beforehand.
Hello, Chair, I'm available.
Good morning, Lloyd. If you could just come in and explain why, although this is a TPO, that you're actually okay with it being removed.
Yes, of course. We've considered this very carefully. We appreciate that the tree is a significant feature in the street scene and therefore has amenity. The problem here is, standing aside from the proposed development, the approximation of the tree to the existing dwelling. A structural engineer's report has been submitted, which I've gone through carefully. The current retaining wall has quite a distortion and a lean, and there is other evidence of cracking in the lower areas. On the balance of probabilities, given the approximation, the tree is likely to be a significant influencing factor on the damage being caused. The problem comes where taking a wall down and repairing it, but repairing it in such a way that it keeps the tree would incur additional costs, and the council could be on the back of a compensation claim for the cost between rebuilding wall and the additional costs of building it in such a way that the tree could be retained. Notwithstanding, the tree now is still not at full maturity, and I felt that if it reached its ultimate height of 30 meters, it's going to require possible tree works. So the view was taken that in light of the potential for the compensation claim, the proximation of the tree to the building, that if we received a tree works application, we would be unlikely to resist the felling of that tree on that basis.
Thank you, Lloyd. So, members, anyone would like to kick off? Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to sound like a worn gramophone record on the subject, because I do feel that we too readily sacrifice trees. In fact, sometimes I think there's almost a policy, if in doubt, take it out. And with all the best will in the world, replacement planting and so on takes at least 30 years to actually replace the tree that's being taken out. And I would be very uncomfortable about the whole development because of the loss of the tree. I think we need to make a stand against it. And if there's competing national policies, I think, you know, we need to be saying our bit to protect trees. BCP Council, I think a couple of years ago or so, committed to planting something like 30,000 new trees. And here you have one tree which is, you know, as the objector has said, is actually sort of protecting our atmosphere and doing its job, that would be removed. So unless I can be convinced otherwise, my inclination is that the tree is important enough for the planning application not to be supported.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor Pedman.
Thank you. The tree office has just talked about the tree not having reached its full height. What is its current height? I'm not sure about that. The difference between full height and current height.
Lloyd, could you answer that question, please?
It's currently between 19 and 20 metres.
So it will in due course be half as high again.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot. Right. The other point I wanted to make is paragraph 54, the wording of it, which has been repeated almost verbatim by the tree officer a couple of minutes ago, that on the balance of probabilities, the tree is likely to be a contributing factor. That to me is not definite enough. So I'm very unhappy about the loss of such a magnificent tree in the circumstances. If it's unnecessary, and it sounds from that it is probably unnecessary.
Thank you, Councillor Pedman. Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pedman's taken a lot of what I was going to say, but I'm also concerned that this tree is currently doing its job. It is benefiting the community. It is, and the biodiversity gain, well, there isn't one essentially, or the mitigation in place will not replace what that tree is currently doing. I think our usual kind of swap to the biodiversity is not strong enough in any case, and in this case the tree is already doing far more than the mitigation planned. Thank you.
Any other members wishing to speak at this time? Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think then the tree officer said that the additional cost of rebuilding the wall isn't really a reason for, you know, to bring that in. Surely the cost on a development like this would be very minimal, and to protect the tree, we still have a tree, and it costs a roof. I don't think additional cost to the developer is any reason at all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the refused application from 2021, and that was refused on scale, mass and bulk. The actual footprint seems to be similar in this application. Could the officer just confirm why he thinks there's a difference in the bulk? Thank you.
Yeah, so the main difference in terms of the bulk on this is that we've got a reduced number of dwellings on the site, and that in turn creates a greater spatial separation between well, with the new development, you have a greater spatial separation around each of the new buildings. So therefore, you'd have a more spacious, open character of the site being retained.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions and comments from anybody? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Jay. And I think obviously the tree is the major point here, because as far as the rest of the developments and the report is concerned, I don't see a problem. I think the design of the buildings is excellent. The principle of subdivision in the street is already established. It's not dominant or bearing, as it's lower than the surrounding buildings. The plot sizes are still very generous for the new for the proposed buildings. But it is that tree, and clearly, as we've heard, the decisions that were made in the past about the developments that are currently on the site were clearly quite short-sighted, and now we end up in a position where we've got to decide between retaining our trees, which are absolutely necessary, and providing homes that will be needed for the future. And it's not a choice that we would like to have to make ever, particularly here. The fact that the arboricultural officer has made the same decision regarding that tree in 2 planning applications, made the same recommendation in the refused one from last year, and now says to me that there has been a consistent feeling about that tree for a significant period of time now, and that leads me to lean towards supporting the officer's recommendation. As much as that makes me feel a little uneasy, I think it's the planning decision that we should be making. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Yes, I think this scheme just highlights that developers are not taking climate change and the ecological crisis that we have seriously, and I feel very, very strongly that this tree is extremely important, and that developers need to start thinking more seriously about how they develop sites so that they keep mature trees. Obviously, biodiversity, heating in the urban environment, and how trees protect from that, and also surface water drainage that wasn't really covered very adequately in the paper. All of these are just hugely important, and I'd just like developers to pay attention to this more seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. Just for point of clarification, Chairman, and I'm not sure whether this is for the tree officer or the planning officer or both. In terms of the mitigation, it was mentioned, I think, earlier in the presentation, a number of trees to be planted in mitigation. If I could have some clarity on that. Also, the species and benefits of the trees to be planted. And lastly, the maturity of those trees. Thank you.
Yeah. With regards to the biodiversity, condition 8 on the application seeks to get measures for enhanced biodiversity on the site. In terms of for future landscaping, soft landscaping, that's a reserved matter. That would be a subsequent application, in which we would be able to secure and look into the species mix and the type of soft landscaping planted on the site.
Thank you, members. This is a bit of a quandary, this one, isn't it? Because it is an outline submission, and the outline submission is on scale and bulk of the buildings. And I haven't heard a great deal of debate about the actual buildings. This has been merely focused on the tree. I'd be interested to know what people think about the development, disregarding the tree at this moment in time, because I would like to maybe ask Mr. Hodges if there was a possibility that we could either maybe defer this for further talk on the tree situation as to whether that can be retained, because I'm sensing that it is the tree that is preventing this from going forward. And if there was a way of circumnavigating the tree issue, then I think the application may well get the blessing of the board.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, yes, it'd be helpful to understand if the concern about the development goes beyond just a tree, and is the principle of, because it's an outline application, is the principle of repair of semis and the detached house on the property viewed as acceptable if we could retain the tree, or is there a greater concern about the extent of development and that being out of character? So there would be, we obviously don't want to engage in negotiations with the agent on the tree issue. It's obviously members are actually concerned about the physical development itself as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to keep the tree. That's my personal opinion. I think the tree is a huge specimen, and yes, it may cause problems in the future. But I think we need to decide whether or not we are happy with the development in principle. But we can come back and discuss about the tree as well. But I think we need to give the officers something to work with here on this one. Councillor O'Neill?
Yeah, I mean, if you like a comment on the development, because I did look at that, consider that as well. There was in this area, the flat roof development is not unusual. And indeed, there was a slide earlier with, I think, approved development, some apartments, which were similar in design. As a concept, I did not have an issue with the development. And my issue would have come solely down to the tree. Because I think, 25 years with another probably 10 metres of growth is a serious consideration. We are seeing more and more trees lost. And this is a mature tree, well located and appreciated. So the tree was the issue for me, not the development per se. Thank you.
Yes, I can't see on any of the plans we've got, because they're looking at the future, not the present and past, indicated actually where the tree is in relation to the proposed development. I don't know whether the
Jen, do you have a picture of that?
Clarify.
So we have this plan here, which shows, which I believe this is a similar location as where the existing tree is at the moment. And yet these are the proposed new houses nearby.
I get that. Well, where's the tree? Exactly. I mean, I've seen it on the.
Do you have a street view of it as it is at the moment?
So we have a street view here.
And the development would be directly behind that, yeah? So that would be on the front, on the... Yeah,
oh, sorry, I understand what you're saying now. It would be, from what I believe, house number 3 would be the closest one to that. Sorry.
So if that's house 3, that's where you're... And the tree is that one down in the right-hand corner, I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, if we can just, please, in the audience, I'm going to bring Mr. Howells. Do you have something constructive to add? If you could come to the microphone, sorry. This is not usual for me to do this, but I think it might clarify a point.
Chairman, if you can bring up the site plan, please. The tree is actually positioned roughly between where houses number 2 and 3 would actually be. May I press the screen, please? Good point. Just for clarification.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Howells. Much appreciated. Okay. Ladies, do you? If one of you could come to the screen, that would be appreciated. Sorry to involve you in our discussions here. That's always helpful. If you can just point where you think this tree is. No, yeah, we've come to that. If you look at those grey spots, the grey buildings, that's where the new houses would be. The one on the right-hand side there at the bottom with a little circle around it, where your finger is now, we think that is the tree there. Yeah. No, Mr. Howells thinks it's midway between those. Yeah, a bit further to your left, just there. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you're in agreement on that. Yeah. Okay, if you could take your seat again, because we can't hear that. Thank you very much. Right, so we are in agreement now as to where this tree is. So, Mr. Hodges, could you suggest a way forward on this one?
Chairman, I think the issue which you've had highlighted to you is obviously at the moment 2 of the units are basically in the position of the tree. So I think you're looking at a kind of fundamental redesign of the scheme.
Okay.
So that makes it a little more awkward, because it's not just a case of thinking about can we just move it across a bit and we'll get 3 units in.
Yeah.
I think that's potentially fundamental to the nature of the development that you're looking at. So if the desire was to retain the tree, I think we're looking at the refusal.
Okay. Okay. So we've heard Mr. Hodges' comments there. No, that's it now. Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, enough, please. Thank you.
David, I found it quite difficult to hear what Mr. Hodges was saying because he was facing towards you.
Basically, Mr. Hodges' advice is that if it is fundamental that we wish to keep the tree, then we are looking at a refusal rather than any form of deferral, because it would negate a need to redesign the plots on this one. But I think one of the things is that I think the applicant is aware that our thoughts of having the development is not negative. It is just redesigning possibly to accommodate that tree and to do something to make sure that that tree is retained and retained safely for any future use. So, Councillor Rice?
Yeah, you were asking for comments about the scheme in general.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I would appreciate seeing the building materials mentioned in terms of sustainable building materials.
That would come through at the next stage. This is an outline submission.
Also, the amount of hard landscaping.
Yeah,
that they've
again,
drawn.
that's
Yeah. Okay.
that comes through. When it's an outline submission, you're only dealing with bulk and scale. The rest of it will come through at the next stage of the application.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No.
I do have the tree survey plan. I don't know if that would help at this stage to put up on the screen.
Please do.
Just briefly. Hang on. Yeah. Well, it's a jump over easy. Okay, so that is the tree in question, just south of the garage and drive. So hopefully everyone's clear on that in terms of location. What unfortunately you can't see is obviously where the houses are proposed in relation to that, but that puts us in tree.
May I?
Okay. So, members, we have no moves on the table at this moment, as far as I'm aware. It's been a long time since I last spoke. So, is there anyone happy to make any moves at this moment in time? Councillor Pedderman.
I'll move to refuse.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder for that?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. And your reasons for the refusal?
Principally, the need for the removal of the tree, which is a significant asset and ecological asset to the community, and not just the immediate area, but the wider community of the whole of Poole.
Okay. You happy with that, Mr. Hodges?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It should be related back to policy PP 27. Yep. As that refers to development being permitted, providing it enhances local development in terms of landscape and visual impact, response to natural features on the site. So that would refer to trees. And just to add again, Chairman, we need to deal with this issue of phosphates and SAM's payments for heathlands as part of the refusal, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, I'll call names in turn again, and we have a move to refuse this application. If you could please say for if you are for it, against if not. Councillor Borthwick. Councillor Bull. For. Councillor Hall. For. Councillor Hilliard. For. Councillor Lawson. Councillor Pedderman. Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Rice.
For.
Councillor Trent. For. And myself, I will also support it for the reasons that it is the loss of the tree on this one. Councillor Johnson? For. That is unanimous. So thank you very much to that, members. It was a very good debate on that, and I appreciate that it is mainly the tree issue on this one that we're looking at, and I reiterate to Mr. Howells that it is mainly the tree. If you can take that back, then I'm sure there is something we can do to come around to this. And thank you very much, ladies, for your presentations and your help with that this morning. Okay, thank you, Jed, for your presentation. So, members, moving on, we'll just allow people to leave. Members, there is an item of urgent business that I need to bring to you this morning, and that is for the, you'll remember that a couple of cycles ago we dealt with the PARS site at Branksome for conversion into an Aldi shop after all these years and everything. And the reason for the urgency is to ensure that the extension of time agreed with the applicant can be met. And I would ask Mr. Hodges to provide a brief update to committee on the conditions and the section 106. Mr. Hodges.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So it's a straightforward issue. The resolution of the committee was to approve, subject to conditions under 106. We worked through with yourself, Chair, and Councillor O'Neill. Having worked through the conditions, my understanding is we don't need a Section 106 agreement in this instance. So the guidance from national government says where you can deal with the matter under conditions, you do that rather than an agreement. So we can actually deal with the, I believe it was highways improvements through conditions, and therefore we don't need a Section 106 in this instance. And it's in effect an update just for clarity, in case anyone obviously was expecting later on when the decision is issued that it would be accompanied.
That was all dealt with, as you remember. Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Trent, myself, Vice Chairman, were all consulted on these, and we spoke with the planning officer, and we were happy with the conditions, everything that were met and sent forward on these. So that was really just a business update, and just to see that everyone is happy with that to go forward, please, so that this development can move on and take place. Everyone happy? Yep. Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to item 7, which is the revised protocol for public speaking statements for planning committee. And I would ask Mr. Firth to run through, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Chairman. So obviously members have the opportunity to have a look at this revised draft. I think members may remember, or may not, that the current version came into force at the time when we were going through COVID situations, and it tried to differentiate more clearly between the issue of virtual meetings that we were having to run at the time and non-virtual meetings. Well, hopefully things have now permanently moved on in a slightly more positive way. And what we've done is taken the opportunity to consolidate the original protocol and make it, I hope, slightly more simple than it was previously, but it still facilitates the scope of virtual meetings should they ever become necessary in the future. So that's the primary intention for it. It's not to make substantive changes. It was more to bring together what we had previously and hopefully make it a bit simpler. That said, there are some limited changes to it. A few points which I'd perhaps pick out, they're minor, but I'll pick them out anyway. So I think one thing we're doing now is the protocol as revised makes clear it's purely concerned with public speaking in relation to planning decisions. As we know, we talked last time, in fact, we've got the protocol coming up to consider another protocol in relation to members considering pre-application matters. Well, the protocol won't apply to that. There's another protocol for that. So just make clear the scope. Bear with me as I scroll through my notes. There's a slight tweak to a couple of the timelines. I think actually looking at them, most of them are beneficial to people who want to make representations, would be my interpretation. But essentially the time for registering when you wish to speak, it's currently 12 noon, at least one clear working day. And the revision, as I understand it, will take it forward to 10 a.m. on the working day before. So you've got more time, in fact, to make that notice. Equally written statements have a slightly beneficial change, which are not too dissimilar to that. We'll have to keep these under, the intention is to monitor those as we go along, because obviously we are giving less time for officers to consider statements, etc. So we have to see how that worked out in practice. Regarding visual aids, I know one question has been raised in relation to those, but just to explain what they're actually saying, that isn't a substantive change from what exists previously. There are basically a number of criteria if you want to use a visual aid to support a statement which you wish to make. And the 5 governing principles, if I can say it that way as I understand it, would be that any document to be relied on has to be supplied electronically to democratic services no later than 12 noon 2 working days before the meeting. The maximum number of slides can't exceed 5. Hard copies should not usually be circulated at the meeting itself. And one of the reasons for that is it recognises that people attending remotely wouldn't be able to see hard copies being circulated. Usually it will be displayed by the planning officer, so they'll build it in as part of their presentation and have them available when the person wants to speak. And any material someone wants to rely on must also have been previously made available to the council as part of a representation or submission relating to that application by the date of agenda publication. And the reason for that is we don't want people being surprised by new information coming forward at the last minute. So essentially, yes, they have to provide it to Democratic Services 2 working days before, but that information must have been made available publicly essentially before that. That's what really we're talking about. So that's that change. I said it doesn't really change what existed before. I think it's fair to say we've lost a few bits in the protocol which have made it simpler. And one of the reasons we've lost it is we focus now more on this purpose, which is to the rules relating to people speaking at committees. So some of the other stuff I think drifted onto topics that probably were outside that, and so we've got rid of those. And I think that's primarily it. I think the other thing it says, which is worth noting, that if someone has registered a right to speak and pulls out after the deadline for registering speaking, then you wouldn't normally appoint another person, because we're not going to start chasing around to try and find someone who might want to speak, bearing in mind we've limited the date by which the people have to tell us anyway. So I think that's it, Chairman. The essence is it's largely the same, a few minor tweaks. The only thing I would mention is in reading it for the purpose of today, I picked up a couple of other minor changes which I think might be helpful to add clarity. So if I can just briefly mention those, if members are happy to adopt them, they don't change anything in substance. I'd suggest changing paragraph 11.1. It currently, and what I'd suggest is a change, it's 4 lines down. If members want to pull it up, they can see it. So paragraph 11.1, after the word equipment, I suggest putting a full stop, and it says, other than in the case of a wholly virtual meeting, this would be as an alternative to attending the meeting in person. Again, Chairman, it doesn't change substance. What it makes clear is it applies to both. It will cover situations which are both wholly virtual and otherwise. And paragraph 12.3, I would suggest that's reworded. Again, very similar point actually. I'd suggest rewording that to read, this protocol includes provisions enabling the opportunity to provide a statement as an alternative to speaking in person, stroke as a default option in the event of a person being unable to speak at the appropriate meeting time. So the reason for that change, Chairman, is simply to make clear that what we're offering is the opportunity to provide a statement. So if someone might not be able to attend, they can give a statement and have it read out as an alternative. So it gives them basically a default position to cover them. That's it, Chairman. Not a lot more to say about that. Probably more than I was intended to say, actually, but hopefully that's of assistance. And I said, hopefully members are happy with it and happy to provide any answers to any questions members that may have.
Any questions for anyone? Councillor Hilliard?
Thank you, Chair. 3 observations. First one was you mentioned it about the providing the photos when the agenda comes out. I've had a couple of residents just query that because it's not always clear that their application they're interested in will be on the agenda. So to provide photos before the agenda comes out seems a bit tricky. I don't know what the protocol is if someone's objected to it 2 months ago, and do they get told it's coming into the agenda and the opportunity to put it on?
So shall I pick that up, Kevin? So to be clear, what we're really saying is obviously all people, objectors or indeed supporters will be notified of applications, and they will have that opportunity to make representations during the notification period. And actually what usually happens beyond that, you get stuff flowing in as well. What we're saying is if you want to supply something electronically to show at the meeting, then as part of that process, that's when the information should be provided.
Yeah, because I think what these residents were saying was, well, until we actually see the report, we don't know what our photos should be focusing on to bring out clearer. So that was one point. And then the other two, we've obviously had in the last 3.5 years instances where they've been a big development and we've allowed longer time. That wasn't actually clear in there. And then similarly, there will always be cases where, and we've had it, where there has been more than 2 people speaking in the 5-minute slot. So I think to restrict it was a bit undemocratic.
So, Chairman, if I may come back on those, in answer specifically to the point of time, I think actually that it is covered indirectly, because what it is, I think it's given a discretion to the chairman to alter time, and bear with me if I can find the relevant. Okay, sorry, I'd have to trawl through, but yes, I think that's the way we've operated it up to now, because actually how much time you might want to allow extra might well depend on the situation as well. And as the chairman knows, we will always approach him in advance of those meetings and ask him if he wants to exercise that discretion. So I think if it's in there, that's good. I'll have to recheck to find it, but that's what we'd do. As far as the point on the uncertainty of objectors as to what's produced, I think that's just, unfortunately, it is just the consequence of trying to be fair to all parties. We wouldn't want the applicant feeling they could add in new information at the last minute, and we wouldn't want the objectors to add in new information. It's basically to make sure all parties have the opportunity to see what's being presented for the purpose of the committee, and I'm not sure there's a great answer to that, other than the balance we tried to strike.
Yeah, I think like you're talking about professionals and you're talking about the planning applicants usually. In terms of residents finding something, I agree with Councillor Hillier. I would be very concerned that they have to, everything that is possibly going to have come up, they have to submit photographs in the notification period, when then lots of discussion happens afterwards, and they're not able to be able to present anything on that.
So it doesn't actually say the notification period, it says prior to the agenda. So I gave the notification period when you'd normally expect information to come forward, but you then have the run up all up to that point. I mean, bearing in mind, documents are normally put on the public domain as they come in relation to planning applications. So it's not usually a case of somebody would be surprised by information. Except there is a balance to struck there,
yeah,
and I can't say there isn't. I
would just say that, like, in all practicality, I wouldn't have thought they're going to be coming up with anything particularly new or challenging. I would have thought members of the public can present stuff maybe within 5 days of the meeting. I would have thought officers would already have the knowledge that anything that comes up is likely to be able to be answered. So I just think that seems like we want to engage members of the public to be able to talk. We don't want to restrict them.
It's not just the objectors, it's all the officers, it's the applicants as well. It's trying to make sure everyone has information in time and in good time of the committee items to make sure they all are able to comment. The danger is if you don't do that, then someone turns up in advance and say, well, I haven't seen this information, it's new information, I'd like the matter to be deferred. But I haven't had the opportunity to consider it.
But you're allowed to, like, no matter what you're allowed to write what you want to write within the 2 days or whatever it is, the day. I don't see particularly what the difference is with presenting a photo as opposed to describing it written. We accept it as written, okay. A photograph just helps everybody understand things better.
So again, Chairman, to cover that, so for example, it's not necessarily a pure photograph we're talking about. It could be someone tries to submit, and this is experience I've had. You've seen information where they try to submit a photo montage, which they've produced. And the problem with that is it might or might not be accurate, it may or may not be fair or reasonable or misleading to the situation. And that's the sort of situation I think you're more likely to get when someone would come along and then say, I haven't had the opportunity to consider that properly. In fact, I think only a few items ago at committee, we had that very issue come up, and there was concern expressed about a photo montage that was provided. So,
what do you mean by a photo montage?
So, a photo montage where someone essentially tried to, in the case I can think of, or a few cases where they tried to take a photograph and impose on that an example of what the proposal would look like in a specific situation. So they overlay essentially on top of a photograph an impression.
Yeah. And
that the danger is that's misleading, and if people haven't had the opportunity to comment on it or consider it properly, it creates a situation where someone could, in my view anyway, say I haven't had the opportunity to properly comment on that. So I'm not saying there's a perfect answer to this. It's about trying just to be fair to all parties.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just worth reiterating about the photo montage issue. On 9 out of 10 cases, that they're being put forward by somebody who's often wanted to get their case across and are entirely genuine in their approach. But it's just that we haven't necessarily had an opportunity as officers to check the dimensions or check the validity or accuracy of the image that they've produced. So whilst we're not wanting to stifle genuine interaction, it needs to be done in proper consideration of whether it's actually a factual image or whether that it may be open to interpretation.
Yeah. One other point with regards to that, then encouraging the public to know that they can submit photographs, but they have to do it quite far in advance, is to put that somewhere earlier on in the planning application and in all the correspondence. If you are planning to speak and you wish to present images, then please be aware this is the timescale. Yeah.
Yeah, Democratic can deal with that first. That's okay. Councillor Hilliard?
No, that was my point.
Thanks. Any others, Councillor Barron?
Would it be possible to put that on site notices? I know it might mean putting two A4s together somehow. I know it could be a bit of a pain, but that would help residents, as to what they can do.
That's where site notices problem might be off the top of my head, the prescribed forms. So certain notifications are, I could be wrong on that. Yeah. But I guess the point is that it can be looked at, and if it's possible.
I think we need to look at what's on the council's website, where it says under the section where it does say to comment on planning applications. I think that's what it needs to be put in there so that residents are aware when they go onto that if they're going to make a comment and they want to submit photos, now is the time to do it. I think if we can adjust that on the portal, then that's what needs to be done.
I think spare officers have heard what's being said, and if we can find ways of making that clearer through whatever process, then we'll look to explore into that.
Okay, members. So I'll move that we adopt those. Do I have a second of that, Councillor Johnson? All in favour? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And then moving on, item 8 is the draft protocol for pre-application presentations. And again, I'll ask Bob to briefly. Did you note that word? Briefly outline.
I've learned from the last one, Chairman.
Very sorry. Tiny thing. If you could just go through that document doing the word check for chairman. I only spotted one chairman. The rest of the time it was chair. So if it could be changed.
Well, I am a chairman. I'm not a chair.
Yeah, but you're not going to be it for always.
I apologise. We did try to remove the word chairman and put chair everywhere. But thank you.
I don't. I don't. Sorry.
Chairman, do you want me to move on?
Yes, please.
Well, I'm not going to say anything on this one, Chairman, because I think it's relatively straightforward. Members know why we brought this forward. It's to deal with pre-app presentations. We've kept it to the bare minimum, I think. We've captured the sort of spirit of identifying what's like to come forward, and we've set out the general rules. And I think it's fair to say that within the rules, we're suggesting the emphasis on is primarily given to priority on planning members, but then every other committee council member as well will have an opportunity to hopefully speak as in addition. That's it, Chairman. I'm not going to say any more unless members want to ask me.
No, I think when we ran through this a couple of weeks ago, I think everyone pointed out their pitfalls and falls and against on this one. I think the pre-app thing for me is a really good way forward. It's something I'd really like to do. It's worked really well in the past for things I've sat on. So, anyone, Councillor Pedderman?
Yeah, just a question about what comes. I know we've got it set out in number 3, but who initiates it? Will it be the planning officers saying to a potential developer, we think it would be a good idea if you brought it to the planning committee for pre-app? Or could developers say, please, may we?
Good point.
That's a good point. I don't know the absolute answer. My suspicion is it could be a combination of both of them. Yep. Be it horses for courses, whatever seems most appropriate.
Anyone else? Anyone on this one? No? So we're happy to adopt those members? Yep. Thank you very much. And with that, goodbye. That's the meeting closed.